Good evening. Welcome to Novara Live on this wonderful Tuesday. My name is Bastani. Happy St. George's Day to all of those of you who celebrate. It seems to be just on Twitter, but I'm sure it's more than simply an online phenomenon, or so I'm told. Tonight I'm joined, quite unusually I must say, by Michael Walker. Michael, how are we?
Very well. I have been enjoying St. George. I have to say, I didn't know it was happening either until I saw people tweeting about it. And I listened to a history podcast last night about St. George, but I fell asleep after about 5 minutes, so I can't tell you much about him.
Did you have a pint of ale in honour of St. George, Michael?
I have just had some spaghetti with lemon and parmesan. Not very English.
That's a very Novara response.
I had a bacon and egg bagel, which is kind of somewhat British with a twist, I suppose, for lunch.
Well, better luck next year. Maybe have a fry-up before the St. George's Day show in 2025, Michael. Coming up later tonight, protests have continued across US university campuses over Israel's war on Gaza. The US Commerce Secretary let slip at what's really going on with the American approach to Taiwan and China. Such an interesting story. And Keir Starmer weighs in on, you guessed it, St. George's Day. Stay tuned for all of that. But first, Sunak's Rwanda policy has now become law. The government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda has passed its final parliamentary hurdle. Last night, the House of Lords dropped its opposition to the legislation. But in the wake of the bill passing, tragedy struck in the Channel. A 7-year-old girl and 4 other people have died after trying to cross from France on a small boat. According to reports, a dinghy loaded with 112 people ran into difficulty in the early hours of this morning. The 6 people from the boat were rescued from the water by French authorities, but only one of them survived. A further 47 were taken from the boat by rescuers and returned to France, but the remaining 57 decided to stay on board and continue their journey to the UK. Responding to those deaths, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said this: "We want to prevent people from making these dangerous crossings. If you look at what's happening, criminal gangs are exploiting vulnerable people. They're packing more and more people into these unseaworthy dinghies. We've seen an enormous increase in the numbers per boat over the past few years. This is what tragically happens when they push people out to sea, and that's why, for matters of compassion more than anything else, we must actually break this business model and end this unfairness of people coming to our country illegally." It's hard to reconcile Sunak's claim of compassion with the cruelty of the government's Rwanda policy. The plan was first stopped by the Supreme Court last year, when it ruled that the scheme was unlawful and that Rwanda was not a safe country to send asylum seekers to. The bill that passed last night has allowed the government to declare the country safe by Act of Parliament. Very unusual. And it also creates a new power to allow the government to ignore interim orders issued by the European Court of Human Rights. These were successfully used in the summer of 2022 to stop an aircraft taking off for Rwanda with several asylum seekers on it. And no flights have been able to take off since. Speaking yesterday, this was Sunak on how that's all about to change.
"We are going to deliver this indispensable deterrent so that we finally break the business model of the criminal gangs and save lives. Starting from the moment that the bill passes, we will begin the process of removing those identified for the first flight. We have prepared for this moment. To detain people while we prepare to remove them, we've increased detention spaces to 2,200. To quickly process claims, we've got 200 trained, dedicated caseworkers ready and waiting. To deal with any legal cases quickly and decisively, the judiciary have made available 25 courtrooms and identified 150 judges who could provide over 5,000 sitting days. The Strasbourg Court have amended their Rule 39 procedures in line with the tests set out in our Illegal Migration Act. And we've put beyond all doubt that ministers can disregard these injunctions with clear guidance that if they decide to do so, civil servants must deliver that instruction. And most importantly, once the processing is complete, we will physically remove people. And to do that, I can confirm that we've put an airfield on standby, booked commercial charter planes for specific slots, and we have 500 highly trained individuals ready to escort illegal migrants all the way to Rwanda, with 300 more trained in the coming weeks.
Sunak is clearly throwing everything he has at the plan. And it's no wonder. His electoral future hangs on it. The new law will put the Rwanda scheme as a whole outside of judicial oversight, something the Law Society has described as, quote, a backward step for the rule of law and the UK's constitutional balance. But lawyers' hands aren't tied. This was immigration lawyer Nicholas Hughes on the Today programme.
Individual circumstances, though, are still kept within the bill. And you can still be arguing whether that individual has specific needs or specific concerns that need to be considered before taken to Rwanda.
What would you say to a minister who might say to you and to others working in the same area as you, what you're doing potentially is prolonging a business, an appalling business of people trafficking across the channel, because this is all designed to stop that people trafficking business, and that you and others, however well-meaning you might be about individual cases, you are actually longer term assisting in something terrible happening?
There is absolutely nothing that we have seen in any reporting, in any articles throughout the Rwanda litigation that I was a part of in the Supreme Court, that shows that this policy is a deterrent. If this is a flagship policy to stop the boats, as Mr. Sunak claims it is, there's no evidence that it's doing so. What we are doing is protecting vulnerable individuals from being sent to places which might cause them severe harm. Whether or not the Rwanda policy stops the boat is Mr. Sunak's concern. So far, we've seen no evidence that it does.
And in a word, how certain are you that you will be able to prevent clients of yours being sent?
Well, not in a word, but we'll do everything we can.
The bill currently allows a deportation order to be challenged if an asylum seeker faces, quote, real, imminent, and foreseeable risk of serious irreversible harm if removed to Rwanda. But speaking on Radio 4's Today programme, Illegal Migration Minister Michael Tomlinson gave the sense that the government wasn't going to take that exemption particularly seriously.
If you're a victim of torture, can you still be removed under this?
Rwanda is a safe country, and yes, it will be possible to remove those to Rwanda.
Understood. So any victim of torture, no point applying on that basis. Victim of trafficking?
Rwanda's a safe country, Michelle. I'm not going to... You could go through a whole raft of this. You could you've asked me a question.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying because personal circumstances...
Michelle, this is rather frustrating. You've asked me a question, and you could ask me a series of questions. Could you do this challenge? Could you do that? You could ask me an infinite number of challenges. You could say, right, well, here's a handbook of all the... You're not going to get that clarity because the Act hasn't yet come into force. There is not royal assent.
You're trying to stop the legal challenges, aren't you? For example, that's why a lawyer could just say, OK, well, if my client is a victim of torture, there's no point applying on that basis because that doesn't rule them out. Whatever physical or mental state they are in, they're still eligible to be on a plane to Rwanda.
Bizarre response there from a senior member of the government, seemingly unable in a calm, calculated way to communicate what is essentially the Hail Mary policy of this government. If they can't execute on this policy and if they can't communicate that execution, they're going to see probably their biggest defeat at least since the 20th century, start of the 20th century, if not ever. So they probably need to think about that at least. Now, even with the Rwanda plan looking like it could be back on track, the chances of the Tories winning the next election are, of course, still slim. And that means Labour will be left to deal with this policy and its aftermath. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper was asked about her plans.
Just to be absolutely clear, day one of a potential Labour government, a flight is due to take off. You would stop it?
No, we won't do the Rwanda scheme. We will put that money instead.
Flight. Day one. The plane would not leave the runway.
Do you know what we want is actually to increase flights as part of a returns and enforcement scheme? Because at the moment there's been this 50% drop in returns, and actually since the last Labour government, and that means you've got over 40,000 people who are in the UK who are failed asylum cases, and we've had cases of people who actually are saying they want to return to their own country, and the Home Office is saying, oh no, you've got to wait 6 months or you've got to wait 9 months. I mean, you really couldn't make it up. That's the bit of the system we have got to get a grip on, and that means making sure that those flights are working, because currently they're not.
Just a simple yes or no. Day one of a potential Labour government, you are in power, a plane is on the runway, about to take off. Would you stop it?
And that's not how the system actually will work, even under the Conservatives. That's not how it will work. But look, let me be clear. We are not planning to do the Rwanda scheme.
I mean, this is obviously, look, the problem with British media, particularly broadcast, is that everybody thinks they're Jeremy Paxman. You know, Yvette Cooper, the day that Labour becomes the government, Keir Starmer goes into 10 Downing Street, will you personally go on the tarmac of Heathrow Airport and stop the planes? Such a stupid formulation that she's put to her there. The Rwanda scheme has been described as cruel and inhumane by just about every human rights organisation operating in Britain. But the question for Sunak will be, is it cruel enough to keep some of his backbenchers on side? Or will they, like Lee Anderson, defect to Reform UK, a party that thinks the legislation doesn't go nearly far enough? Reform's co-leader Ben Habib appeared on Talk TV, where Julia Hartley-Brewer asked him this.
What would Reform UK do to deal with this issue?
With illegal migrants?
Yeah.
Well, you don't stop the boats by deporting people. The way to stop the boats is to physically stop the boats. The reason Border Force is called Border Force is because they're meant to use force at the border. We've forgotten what border control means. Even when Rishi Sunak talks about stopping these boats, he does it in the context of being nice to the people who are crossing the channel.
Okay, but how do you stop them? What are you going to do? You're just going to stop them in the middle of the channel and just, take them back to Calais? What are you going to do? You establish a force that's well trained and well equipped and capable of intercepting these dinghies, and you stop them entering our territorial water, and you require them to turn round. You require them to turn round. They go, we're not going to turn round, we're just going to keep going.
And then you have a standoff. You have a standoff in the channel, and if necessary, you have to use force.
And then all the migrants jump into the water. What do you do then?
And you might. This is one idea. Provide them with another dinghy in order to climb back in.
And then they say we're going to keep going to England. What do you do?
And then you use force again. And I'm afraid.
So at some point, the Royal Navy or any other body about the Border Force, they're going to have to pick these people out of the water or off a dinghy that's not seaworthy. Okay, and at that point, what do they do with them? Do they take them back to France or not? What do they do with them?
The presumption in your question is that we have a duty of care to people who are seeking to enter our country illegally.
We have a duty of care to people drowning in the channel, yes.
Well, we only, by the way, under international law, Article 98 of the UN Convention of Law of the Sea, we only have an obligation to save people if it's reasonable to do so. And under the same international law, we have the right to turn people back who are seeking to enter our waters illegally.
I understand. I'd love it turning people back. At the point when they refuse to be turned back, or they just someone just puts a knife into the dinghy and it starts deflating, or they jump into the water because they've been told that's what you do, and then you'll be picked up. You know as well as I do, anybody who has ever been on a boat will know that the rules of the sea are very clear. You have to save life where you can save life, and that is what
only if it's reasonable to do so.
I love turning them back. I love the idea of turning them back. I just don't want anybody to drown. Where are you as a person, as a political party, when Julia Hartley-Brewer is the voice of reason on the issue of migration? I didn't think that was possible for Julia Hartley-Brewer to be the voice of enlightenment and intelligent debate on the issue of immigration. And she's got a point, okay? This policy clearly would mean people die. And if you're willing to say, well, that's just what it takes, sorry, then say that. But he's not owning it. He talks about force repeatedly. This isn't about doing anything. You're not forcing anything. You're leaving them to drown and die. That, however, wasn't the end of this rather ghoulish policy pitch.
Are you genuinely saying the Reform UK policy is we will let people drown to make a point? Because I think that's what you're saying.
No, Julia, if someone comes... let's not infantilize these people. They have free will. They were safe in France. They paid good money to get on a boat seeking illegally to come. So I'm not going to infantilize them, and I'm not going to be held to ransom by their claim that they deserve protection as soon as they get into our territorial waters. I agree with all of that.
At the point when they use the tactic of jumping into the sea and they're drowning, Are you saying that British Border Force and the British Navy will be instructed not to rescue those people from drowning?
You didn't hear me. I said that we could, as an idea, provide them with another dinghy into which to climb and then go back to France. And if they choose to scupper that dinghy, then yes, they have to suffer the consequences of their actions.
Then you would leave them to drown?
They cannot, absolutely, they cannot be infantilized to the point that
I have
we
no doubt, Ben, that is a policy that would work quite well. However, that is not a policy that a civilized country should endorse.
Why is that uncivilized, Julia?
Because we don't leave people to drown, because we're civilized human beings. I don't want these people here. I don't think they should be infantilized either. But I wouldn't leave someone to drown. No, I wouldn't. I don't think there's anyone in Border Force or the Royal Navy who would do that.
Well, I'm afraid border force means using force at the border.
Perplexing, like I say. For Julia Hartley-Brewer to be the voice of enlightened common sense says something quite significant. Michael, I have a question for you, and I'm really intrigued by your answer. Do you really believe Ben Habib when he says this? If Ben Habib saw somebody drowning in the channel, let's say it was a small child, and of course the child's passed away today in precisely these circumstances. If a small child was dying in the channel, would Ben Habib just leave them there?
Well, it wouldn't be him, would it? Because I suppose he doesn't work in any of those professions. I wonder if if he were to have to, if Reform UK were to come into power and they were to institute that policy, then you as a journalist, you'd get him in a boat, wouldn't you? And say, you have to come out with a border force and watch these people drown while we film. I mean, it's a strange scenario to go into, I'm afraid. So apologies for that. But yeah, would he? I don't think he would do it personally. I see where they're coming from. I mean, I think they're completely wrong. I was actually very surprised to see Julia Hartley-Brewer there take that position. I wouldn't have been surprised if she had taken the position that Ben Habib was, considering what she has said in the past. I suppose, how have people managed? Because all parties say they want to stop the boats crossing, right? All parties. Safe routes is important for very moral reasons, but it won't stop boats crossing, I don't think, unless the safe routes sort of allow if you had a safe route from France, yeah, maybe actually that would, because you just have 50,000 people. They get their claim heard there, and then they get deported if it fails from within France. Although you'd still have an incentive to cross in case you wanted to sort of disappear into society without claiming asylum. But lots of the people who are coming here, or the vast majority of people who are actually coming to the UK, do have a valid asylum claim, so they would apply in France. Obviously, we would then so we should do that. That's what Labour should say they'll do. We would then be piggybacking off, though, the EU's border controls. So there would be something, somewhat disingenuous about that to say that is the solution to the migration problem, because then the European border is as heavily policed as our border, if not more, and how that works. So you can turn boats back sort of by law if you've got an agreement with that country and you can get them there safely. So when Australia had a turn back policy, they had an agreement with the countries. Well, one, they were sending them to an island, Nauru, but then also if you have an agreement with a country from which those people are coming, you can turn back boats. That's what they do in Libya, for example. So the Europeans pay Libya to police their coast and turn back any boats to Libya. But then obviously it's not official policy to let them drown. It's just to get them back to the shores of Libya, where, by the way, they are subject to really horrific human rights conditions. So this issue of migration and asylum is one where I don't think there are any simple answers. But coming forward and saying what we have to do is get used to the fact that we're going to intentionally drown people in the channel is definitely not one of the answers we should be turning to. I mean, also, there is a sort of infantile level in which this debate is being had in this country, because the Tories have put so much energy into this Rwanda policy, which absolutely everyone knows is not going to work. Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult one. I'm almost speechless because I've seen Julia Hartley-Brewer be the more humane person in a conversation, and I really don't think I have seen that before.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary. I don't like this argument that people who are the children of migrants or who migrated here should therefore be more progressive on migration, because I think that's a rabbit hole you go down and all of a sudden you start treating different parts of the electorate differently. I don't agree with that. But Ben Habib came to the UK when he was 14. Legally, but he came from Pakistan, a country which, has many domestic political problems right now, has for a very long time. There will be Pakistani nationals who do precisely this trip, or Afghans next door. Arguably, Afghanistan's been completely screwed up, partly because of the Pakistani security services, the ISI. Michael, quickly though, what I didn't quite understand there, because what I expected from Ben Habib was him to say, well, actually, what we should have is the Royal Navy would pick them out of the water and they would escort them back to France. That's what I expected him to say, but he didn't say that. So what's foreclosing the possibility of that happening? Even if it's in British waters, could there be some kind of treaty with France where you do that? Because I would have thought that would be instinctively where reform would tend to.
Well, if you had an agreement with France, that's what you'd do. The way to stop the boats would be to have an agreement with France whereby anyone who tries to cross the channel will get taken back to France. Right? The issue is that that's not particularly attractive for France, and so the UK would have to do something in return. And so this is what actually a fairly sensible policy, which the Labour Party put forward, and then sort of stepped back from because they saw that this was a potential area where the Tories could attack them, is they were saying that the UK should sort of take part in a asylum sharing scheme, essentially a sort of centralised European Union scheme where asylum seekers who arrive in the EU, they will be shared out, hopefully with some sort of choice of where people want to go, but there will be burden sharing. It's a phrase that lots of people don't like, responsibility sharing, let's say, within the European Union. And if the UK signed up to that, then it would be quite possible for us to come to an agreement with the EU where the moment someone crosses the channel, they can get sent back to France, or even the boats can get turned back. I mean, this was the Dublin Agreement. So the European Union still has a Dublin Agreement, which means that you can automatically deport any irregular migrant to the first country at which they were registered. So if someone arrives in Germany and you say, oh, well, you've already been stamped in Greece, then Germany can, by European law, deport them immediately back to Greece. And so obviously, if the Dublin Agreement was in effect, then we wouldn't need to send people to Rwanda because they could just be sent back to France. But it's seen as politically toxic for the UK to sort of take part in any asylum sharing scheme or centralised burden sharing scheme within the European Union. So that's why we're in this mess, essentially.
Pro-Palestinian protests have exploded across university campuses in the United States. At New York University, faculty members formed a ring around student protesters at the college's Gaza encampment last night, protecting them from police. The protest had begun on Monday morning, with students calling for the university to divest its $5.9 billion endowment fund from Israeli investments. By the evening, armed police had broken the encampment up. They also reportedly arrested 150 people, taking faculty members and students away in zip ties. Waving flares and flags and banging drums, the remaining protesters then marched on the New York Police Department headquarters in Manhattan. There, they were confronted by police in riot gear. According to a spokesperson for NYU, university administrators had called the police on the students, describing them as, quote, disorderly, disruptive, and antagonizing. Basically, what a protest is supposed to be. At Yale University in Connecticut, students formed a Gaza encampment too. There they called for the university to divest its $40 billion endowment from Israeli companies and arms manufacturers. Yesterday, police swept onto the campus and arrested at least 47 protesters there. Once again, they had been called by university administrators who said it was for, quote, the safety and security of the entire Yale community. But you can get a sense of exactly how safe the Yale protests are by watching this frankly bizarre counter-protest that took place in its midst. That looked more like absurdist performance art than a protest. I know sometimes the two are hard to distinguish from one another. For people listening on the podcast, that was a lady, seemingly a Jewish American. She was wearing a T-shirt with Jew written on the front of her T-shirt. I think it had Israel on the back and a Star of David. And she's calling on the people at that protest in support of Gaza, that encampment, that people effectively, if you can't see it, people who are basically sitting down, playing the bongos, dancing around, milling around. She's calling on them to dox her, and she won't cover her face. Utterly ridiculous, bewildering. Everyone there is just politely ignoring someone who looks, frankly, like a weirdo, thankfully refusing to rise to the bait. It's almost as if they care about what's happening in Gaza rather than what some random person is saying 20 meters away. That doesn't really matter to them. 15,000 children is where their mind is at. Other protests have appeared at East Coast colleges like Emerson, MIT, and Harvard. In California, students at UC Berkeley have marched for Gaza and started their own encampment. Many of these protests have sprung up in response to heavy-handed tactics at Columbia University in New York. And the arrests at NYU and Yale last night follow a pattern first established by Columbia's administration. There, the university's president called in the police last Thursday, who arrived in riot gear to break up the encampment that formed just days before. 100 people were subsequently arrested, but it made absolutely no difference, as students have continued their demonstrations despite those raids. Yesterday, hundreds of the university's teaching staff walked out in solidarity with the student protesters, and the university has closed its buildings and put all teaching online. The protests now appearing across US campuses stand in a long line of historically important activism that took root in American universities. From the civil rights movement to protests against the Vietnam War, student actions, as well as an often heavy-handed and sometimes violent response to them, have sometimes moved the political dial. So why are American students of all ethnicities, cultures, and religions taking action on Palestine? Well, like the rest of us, they've witnessed 200 days of utter carnage, with Israel having killed more than 34,000 Palestinians in Gaza and nearly 15,000 of those dead children. More than 8,000 Gazans are missing, many likely to be dead but uncounted. Meanwhile, Palestinians continue to uncover mass graves whenever the IDF moves out of an area. But catastrophe still awaits in every corner of the territory. The 1.5 million people clustered in the southern Gazan city of Rafah may soon be attacked by an Israeli ground operation. And in the north of Gaza, famine has begun taking the lives of even more children. Gazans have had to suffer indignity too. They're mocked by the Israeli soldiers who raid their abandoned homes. And when they're not being killed, they suffer dehumanizing and degrading treatment at the hands of their occupiers. And even when the war is over, which at some point it will be, life in Gaza is unlikely to be the same again for many, many years to come, if at all. Hundreds of buildings, homes, pieces of infrastructure, and roads have been wiped away by Israel's bombing campaign, while hospitals, universities, mosques, and cultural institutions have been damaged beyond repair or destroyed altogether. And all of that with the full complicity of many Western governments. Perhaps the question isn't why are these US students protesting, but rather, why isn't everybody else? And Michael, it feels like these protests are having way more impact on the wider conversation than anything during, say, the Iraq War. This feels more like something from the 60s, the 70s in response to Vietnam. That made sense because of the military draft. We haven't got something like that this time round. But there does feel this very strong sense of a relationship to the wider national conversation, politicians at Washington having to pay attention to this stuff, and actions on campuses really shifting the dial in a very meaningful way at the elite level of politics.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of things going on. So one, I mean, I think what we've seen in the past week is just a classic case of overreaction from the police and college administration, and that just completely amplifies a protest movement by an order of magnitude. We've seen this over and over again. I mean, Vincent Bevin's excellent new book, If We Burn, sort of he's describing many of the different, huge protest waves that we saw in the 2010s. And the formula was so often, you have a cause which is somewhat popular, but, people come out and protest it. And then there is repression against them, which is seen as disproportionate by a vast number of people. And suddenly the movement explodes. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing in the United States at the moment. The Iraq comparison, now it's always, I was part of those protests, but I was like 13 or 14 at the time. So it's always, you never want to sort of underplay something when you weren't there. Perhaps if we were living through that moment, we would think those protests were as significant as these. They were obviously bigger, 2 million people and protested in London against Iraq. I suppose because of the tactics you didn't have, that was a very peaceful march. You didn't have the same repression by the police, which encourages then sort of solidarity protests and just the explosion of the movement, except or the explosion in the good sense of sort of the expansion of the movement. I was also wondering, I was sort of desperately trying to Google this before you came to me, Aaron. I think if my memory serves me correctly, the actual Iraq war, the period of sort of conventional fighting was quite short. It was kind of a couple of months whereby, you did have the Western powers sort of bombing the Iraqis in a conventional war. Whereas what we're seeing in Gaza is, you don't want to call it a conventional war because it's really a genocidal campaign, but the lines are very clear. It's an ongoing genocidal war, which I think does mean that sort of tensions within society are just only going to increase. And obviously sort of on an issue that people have felt passionately about for decades and decades and decades, which is why, I think in many senses it's sort of inspiring more attention now on the left than in Ukraine. Obviously, the principal reason is, in fact, actually because we're supporting the Israelis and we're not supporting the Russians. But that comparison, I think, is how long this is going on, I think, is interesting. Because obviously, with Iraq, more deaths were caused by the invasion of Iraq than have been caused in this genocidal war on Gaza. But after the West had invaded, it was unclear what the demand was because they'd invaded, the war was over within a couple of months. And then the problem then was that if you take out a state, then you've sort of just delivered chaos. That was the problem with Iraq. The problem with Iraq was it's completely illegal. You can't just take out a sovereign government. But the consequence, after a couple of months when that had already happened, then you're just overseeing chaos. And then what would a sort of increasingly radical protest movement have looked like? What would it have been demanding? And I suppose that's when the Vietnam War is much more sort of apt comparison to what we're seeing now, because then you had a war which was sort of escalating in brutality as time went on, and it was very clear what the demand was, which was troops out. Right? It was less obvious that would have made sense in Iraq after toppling Saddam Hussein.
Superb analysis. I couldn't agree more. And it does make you wonder, Michael, this has only been going on for 6-7 months, another 6-7 months. What kinds of politics will we see in response? Today, as you may already know, is St. George's Day. No, I don't mean George Michael. I mean the actual St. George, the patron saint of England since at least 1348. Of course, the Cross of St. George is the flag of England, and up until the union of Scotland and England, the day itself was generally an opportunity for feasting and fun. Imagine Christmas dinner, but in late April. Today, that's no longer the case, unfortunately, although Labour under Jeremy Corbyn wanted today to become a bank holiday in England. But while we don't get a day off, we are treated to politicians trying to burnish their patriotic credentials. Lucky us. And this morning, that was nowhere more conspicuous than with Keir Starmer, who shared this video on social media.
What moments in my life have I felt proud to be English? There are personal moments. Family holiday with my parents in the Lake District, when we finally reached the peak of Scarfell Pike. Belting out 3 lions in the crowd at Wembley in '96. Being the first person in my family to go to university. Defending people facing the death penalty in countries that look up to our rule of law. And moments as Labour's leader, meeting people in towns, villages and cities around our country from every background and circumstance, who all share the same sense of decency, honour and fairness. It's a daily reminder of what the Labour Party is and who it serves. From establishing NATO to creating the NHS, Labour is at its best when it has celebrated, defended and served the values of our country and its people. For me, this is what real patriotism is about, serving the country we love. Today, on St George's Day, we come together to celebrate our shared history. Today is about respect for those who've sacrificed so much for us to have the freedoms and the rights that we enjoy today. Respect for those who keep the country going, and respect for each other. The symbol of St George, the St George's flag, belongs to every person who loves this country and seeks to make it better. A symbol of pride, celebration, belonging and inclusion. So on behalf of the Labour Party, I wish everyone a happy St George's Day. Let us be proud of our national identity, confident on the world stage and sure of our country's future.
Ladies and gentlemen, he did it. Keir Starmer managed to crowbar the fact he was the first person in his family to go to university into a video about St. George's Day. I didn't think it was possible, but there we go. Now, I found that video slightly strange for a number of reasons. One is the whole university thing. Then there's the fact it's a video about St. George's Day and St. George, but there's no recognition that it's a Saint's Day rather, or what that historically meant, which, by the way, looks something like a bank holiday. Having time off and feasting and fun. Sounds good to me. Then there's the fact that Starmer spoke about it as some kind of Remembrance Sunday only in spring. Now, of course, people who die in war should be remembered. That's very important. But I don't know what that's got to do with St. George's Day. Nobody says that for Welsh or Scots people who died in World War I and II on St. David's or St. Andrew's Day. I've just never heard that before. Maybe I'm unusual in that respect. You can let me know. Maybe I'm completely out of touch. Also, I'm kind of confused what St. George's Day has to do with things like NATO and the kinds of decisions that were really created by Labour after 1940. I also find it strange, and this is actually a positive, I suppose, for Keir Starmer, that he is more comfortable using this kind of rhetoric, this kind of argot, than any mainstream conservative. I think that's very strange. It's good for Labour, for sure. It might be incoherent, not especially left-wing, but it's certainly good from an electoral perspective. To dive a little bit deeper into that, Starmer wrote this piece for the Sunday Telegraph over the weekend on precisely that topic. Labour is now the true party of English patriotism. I have no time for those who flinch at our flag. The cross of St. George belongs to all who love this country. And in the piece, Starmer writes this. The privilege of meeting people in towns, villages and cities across our country who all seem to share the same stoic wit and quiet decency is a daily reminder of what the Labour Party is and who it serves. Because whether it's establishing NATO and the NHS as monuments to our collective sacrifice in the 1940s, or the renewal of our public realm at the start of this century, Labour is at its best when it has celebrated, defended and served the values of our country and its people. Real patriotism isn't just about respecting our shared symbols and sentiments, it's also about serving the country we love. My entire career, from being this country's chief prosecutor to leader of the opposition, has been dedicated to public service. He's basically saying I've never had a proper job. That's why, after all the changes I have made, this is now a Labour Party that will always put country above party. Wow. This is like Starmer bingo, okay? It's St. George's Day. Did I tell you I'm the first person in my family to go to university? Did I tell you I've changed the party? Did I mention NATO? This is about a Greek-speaking saint, I think from the 3rd century? He wasn't Palestinian, by the way. He was Greek-speaking in what was today Turkey. And he's talking about all of these things. Very strange. Finally, he said this. Labour is the patriotic party now. We will celebrate St. George's Day with enthusiasm. I order you to be enthusiastic. An enthusiasm shared by each patron saint's day on our isles. Now, here's a question, because it's unclear to me what he is actually celebrating. What's he going to be doing? Is he going to be having a few drinks? Is he going to have a reception? Or is it just purely PR? If it is, that rather undermines the sincerity of what Starmer is saying. As I already mentioned, the previous Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, favoured a bank holiday today. Incidentally, here's what the Islington MP had to say on Twitter. Happy St. George's Day. Loving your country means looking after each other to ensure nobody lives in poverty. It means defending our public institutions like the NHS. It means welcoming refugees and celebrating the ways they've made our country a better place. 60% the same as Starmer. Second tweet, I've always believed that today should be one of 4 new public holidays across the UK. Let's bring our country together and give workers the break they deserve. Sorry, that's probably a bit too popular to be policy for the Labour Party right now, Jeremy. Get back in your box. Next, let's look at some of the best tweets from the top Tory patriots on Twitter. Firstly, there's this from who else? Reform UK MP, Lee Anderson.
Look at these here, look. Flag of St. George. It's St. George's Day today, and this country of ours has been a gift to the world. Look at the Industrial Revolution. Culture, arts, music, sports, everywhere you look on this planet, you see some of that. Oh, by the way, happy birthday, William Shakespeare.
Lee Anderson masterclass. Elsewhere, quote tweeting former Page 3 girl Leilani Dowding, Lawrence Fox said this. Happy St. George's Day at Leilani Dowding. I hope this really upsets all the right people, crying emoji. This is something that I find quite fascinating, actually, with a lot of these people, is they seem to celebrate St. George's Day because it'll trigger the left, rather than just celebrating it because they want to celebrate it. By the way, nobody's upset. And here's low energy Rishi being just, well, low energy. Perfect way to start the day. Happy St. George's Day. And there he is with his mug. Dear, oh dear. Personally, I loved this one. Great tweet this from Paul Powsland. He is quote tweeting somebody who's sharing garbage, refuse with a St. George's flag there. Happy St. George's Day. Let an England flag illegally dumped in ancient bluebell woodland remind us of the madness of professing to love our country while allowing its rivers to be polluted with sewage, its ancient trees to be felled, and its precious landscapes littered with plastic. Like any other festivity, people celebrate St. George's Day in their own way. For most people, that means nothing at all. For some, it might mean a quiet pint of beer in the evening sun. But for others still, it means getting pissed on a Tuesday lunchtime and fighting with the police over, well, I don't actually know. Earlier today, a crowd near Downing Street started a fight with the police an hour before an event was meant to start. Your guess is as good as mine as to why they're there. Somebody apparently punched a horse. Owen Jones responded to those scenes with this rather amusing tweet. Thing is, central London literally is a no-go zone for me right now, having been gay bashed up by far-right activists, assaulted and repeatedly mobbed. If I went anywhere near here, I would be absolutely attacked. Unfortunately, I'm left-wing, so this doesn't count. Meanwhile, Novara's own Ash Sarkar said this. How much cocaine do you have to do to attack a horse on a Tuesday afternoon? It's not even a bank holiday. Michael, how do you celebrate St. George's Day?
Well, I haven't done anything St. George's Day today, but I have to admit that last night when I realized it was St. George's Day the following day, I listened to Jerusalem, not like on sort of loudspeakers, but just on my phone. It's quite a nice song. And then I was chatting to my partner about, what might make me proud to be English. And I was quite distraught when I just watched your segment because I kind of said the same thing as Lee Anderson, which was the Industrial Revolution. It's the Industrial Revolution that sort of doubled life expectancies, ripped, hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. And that is the thing, if you think of what did England contribute to the world that's somewhat exceptional, it's the Industrial Revolution and maybe Shakespeare, which is what Lee Anderson said. My partner is Irish, and he said he associates the Industrial Revolution and that period in the history of Britain and Ireland with the potato famine, when we were forcing them to export their goods while their population starved. So obviously the Industrial Revolution means very different things to different people. But I think it is a good day to sort of talk about English history and sort of discover people's different perspectives different perspectives on it, I should say.
It is really interesting. What you said there, Michael, is so true. I wouldn't just say the Industrial Revolution, I'd say science as well, generally, right? I mean, I've said this before, if there was an alien race that visited Earth, there are two laws, scientific laws, evolutionary adaptation and gravity, which they'd be like, we know what you're talking about. This is objective science, which, holds across the universe. And those laws, those universal laws, were discerned by people who lived on these islands. You've got Jenner, comes up with the first vaccine, effectively. So these are kind of important people. Faraday. Those are people to be proud of. And I always find it funny when people talk about Great Britons, they talk about Churchill. What, compared to the person who worked out evolutionary adaptation or gravity? I don't think so. Another question though, Michael, and I find this quite peculiarly interesting. And people, and of course, there's loads of phoniness coming from Starmer, of course. But if you look at France, they've got Bastille Day. If you look at Italy, they've got Republic Day. So there is, generally speaking, and most US has July the 4th, there is a day where you celebrate the nation. You can agree or disagree with that. You can poo-poo it, whatever, but it's very normal. The point is Britain doesn't have that. And of course, one reason why is that England isn't Scotland and Scotland isn't Wales and Wales isn't Northern Ireland. And I find it particularly interesting how in the part of the world where you have the Reformation really take hold, you have, dissolution of the monasteries, they get rid of Catholicism. Saints' days, obviously this is particularly relevant to Great Britain because Ireland is Catholic. Saints' days, which are a quintessentially Catholic thing, are somehow meant to be the expression of secular civic nationalism in Scotland, England, Wales. I find that kind of weird. Meanwhile, in Italy, they have a national saint, Catherine of Siena, but you would never say, right, bank holiday, Catherine of Siena. People are like, what the hell are you talking about? They have their Republic Day. What are your thoughts on that? So should it just be that St. George's Day is this day in England? It's like Republic Day or Bastille Day? Or is that a bit of a stretch? Because frankly, most people aren't religious. It is about a guy in the 3rd century who killed a dragon. If you're going to create a day, should it be for the whole of Britain? Should it be about more than simply a saint from a religion that most people don't actually observe? What are your thoughts?
The simple reason why we don't have a Bastille Day or a Republic Day or an Independence Day is because there is no founding day for either England or the United Kingdom, right? I suppose there must have been a day when England and Scotland signed the union or whatever. But there isn't this big moment whereby we became what we are, which obviously the Americans, the Italians, and the French do. They're all republics. What would we have? Industrial Revolution Week or something? It's a process, isn't it? It's very slow motion, the Industrial Revolution.
If it's a week, Michael, if it's a week of public holidays, I'm in. By the way, I think St. George should absolutely be, and of course, St. Andrews too, and St. David. St. Andrews and St. David, I believe, are bank holidays in Scotland and Wales. And of course, St. Patrick's Day is a bank holiday in Ireland. But St. George is just perfect, right? Just between Easter and the May bank holiday, just perfect. We have to do it. And I'm really surprised the Tories aren't big on this, by the way. Many on the left call themselves anti-imperialists. I'm one of them. And what that means is that they recognise the age of empires didn't magically end with the collapse of the British, French, and Japanese empires after the Second World War. There were others too, of course, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the Belgians, the Italians. At various rates, these all collapsed after 1945, as the world saw the emergence of two new dominant superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. But that wasn't a fair match. In 1945, the US was arguably the most powerful state in human history. It had 50% of global GDP and held 80% of the world's currency reserves. And its allies, including some of the vanquished nations of that war, would quickly return to the front rank of industrial nations, particularly Germany and Japan. This global order reigned utterly supreme after the collapse of the USSR and the end of the Cold War in the early 1990s. Now, the American empire had no challengers. Sounds a little conspiratorial for you, perhaps. Well, listen to this clip from an interview on 60 Minutes with US Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo.
Her toughness has made her a target in China, where fake ads have her promoting the new Chinese-made smartphone. Last year, the government in Beijing hacked her email And when she was in China, on a trip ironically to improve relations, the tech company Huawei introduced that new smartphone with an advanced Chinese-made chip. It was kind of in your face, as if to say, look at the chip that we have. And it was a pretty good high-level chip, right?
Well, I have their attention, clearly.
And they've gotten yours.
Well, what tells me is the export controls are working, because that chip is not nearly as good. It's years behind what we have in the United States. We have the most sophisticated semiconductors in the world. China doesn't. We've out-innovated China.
Well, you mean Taiwan.
Fair.
While American tech companies design the world's most advanced chips, none are actually made in the U.S. 90% of them come from Taiwan, and they are key to the future of U.S. military weaponry. And China, from time to time, threatens, the wolf, to invade Taiwan. And some people say the whole reason is to get their hands on those chips.
That's a problem. It's a risk. It makes us vulnerable.
Now, I love this video because it's one of those moments where the part that the powerful person is not meant to say is spoken out loud through a megaphone. We were told that the US restricted exports of certain electronic goods to China because they were using them for military applications. But here, Raimondo is openly saying that they are working because Chinese phones don't operate on technology as advanced as that found in Apple or Samsung handsets, for instance. And that we she uses is critical. We out-innovated China. By we, she means the US empire, because ultimately its allies, like Taiwan, are parts of a commodity chain that leads back to the US. But of course, the US can't rely on Taiwan. That would be short-sighted. After all, Beijing might invade. And remember, this is a place which produces 90% of the world's most advanced chips. Which is why, to ward against precisely that vulnerability, the US isn't just blocking exports to China, but trying to build domestic chip manufacturing capacity too. Here's another clip from that same interview.
Once at Commerce, she began to lean on Congress.
This is just good business.
To fund her new programs with $100 billion, including $50 billion for the bipartisan CHIPS Act that she is now dispensing to reduce America's reliance on Taiwan.
It's a huge day for the entire country.
Last month in Arizona, she announced her first award for making leading-edge chips in the U.S. to Intel.
We are announcing our intention to invest $8.5 billion in Intel, America's champion semiconductor company.
Intel intends to construct and modernize facilities in Arizona, New Mexico, Oregon, and Ohio. She's made 2 other big awards, totaling $13 billion, to Taiwan-based TSMC and the South Korean company Samsung to make the world's most advanced chips in Arizona and Texas.
Michael, look, I know it's a strange niche story. I love this because it's somebody who's very powerful saying, look, it's clearly about geopolitics, right? When she says, fair, she goes, you got me. Yeah, actually, it's got nothing to do with military applications. We just want Apple to make much better phones than Huawei, big consumer market. And by the way, it's quite useful for spying on people. We see the two sides of this story, right? You've got on the one hand, the embargoes to China. On the other hand, you've got the CHIPS Act and producing more of this stuff in the US, as well as US allies like Taiwan, but also South Korea as a kind of fail-safe, moving away from Taiwan just generally. What's your read on that? I mean, was that just a misstep, or does sort of the US political class, now this has all happened, kind of not really care, and they can just be honest and say, well, look, we don't really believe in the free market. I mean, we say that all the time, if it makes us richer, but when it comes to somebody who's a technological rival, we don't really believe in the free market. We'll actively obstruct them from creating better technology than us.
Well, I think they'll probably quite openly say now that geopolitics sort of trumps the free market. I'm not sure if they do keep that a secret. And I suppose I want to push back against this being a niche story because, what that segment reminded me of, especially when it sort of jumps to that map and sort of zooms in on Taiwan, is if you were like a script writer writing a sort of political drama about sort of a lead up to geopolitical tension. I don't want to, I'm not predicting here a World War III, right? I'm absolutely not. But if you were to sort of design a situation which has loads of moving parts and is incredibly tense, you've got the two superpowers, China, the United States, and then the world's most important resource, which is microchips, being on this very small island, which no one can decide if it belongs to China or if it is, a central part of the geopolitical sphere controlled by the United States. It's as if, in the Cold War, 90% of the world's oil production was produced in West Berlin, right? It just seems like you couldn't have designed a more tense situation than having 90% of the world's most important technology, 90% of microchips, which are the world's most important technology, coming out of this island, which no one can decide who owns it. Our audience will be thinking, what the hell is he talking about? No one can decide who owns it. Taiwan is, functionally an independent nation, a democratic nation, but no one recognizes it as an independent nation because formally there is only one China. Sounds strange, but there is only one China. The United States only recognizes one China. Taiwan only recognizes one China. China only recognizes one China. And there's just ambiguity about which one is the real China. So you just have this really, really sort of unique geopolitical situation. And then on top of that, we found ourselves in a situation where it is sort of the most important island in the world when it comes to the global economy. I just think it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, this is key. I mean, I said it's niche. We'll move on to our final story in a moment. But if, for whatever reason, Taiwan is taken out of the global economy, nobody's making high-end consumer electronics for a couple of years, right? I mean, you could make up the slack with South Korea and the US, with Intel. Wouldn't be as good. You might just see disruption for a couple of years, but it's still a couple of years, right? I mean, it's going to be a massive hit to the world economy. And if China gets its hands on those Taiwanese, they're called fab labs, to make these chips, like you say, I mean, the comparison between chips and oil isn't stupid. That is literally like getting hold of, Saudi Arabia, but for chips. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, China actually spends more importing microprocessors than it does on oil, which is really remarkable. It's partly because it has a bunch of sort of indigenous energy, particularly coal, and it's using increasingly lots of renewables and whatnot. But still, that's a hell of a fact. And yeah, let's see how this story develops. But like you say, Michael, it is rather strange. It's an argument almost for a simulation, isn't it? This utterly critical, important part of the global economy being the one place where we don't actually know who's going to end up with their hands on it. Fascinating story, by the way, how Taiwan developed this huge domestic industry, particularly with state intervention. Of course, conservatives, they never want to talk about that. Gideon Falter occupied countless newspaper headlines and studio sofas this past weekend. That was after footage of his encounter with a police officer at a pro-Palestinian march in London went viral. We've already reported on how Falter's claims of innocently stumbling across the march while out for a stroll after synagogue quickly evaporated on closer examination. But in a way, it doesn't matter, because the leader of the campaign against anti-Semitism may have already achieved everything he wanted, namely massive disinformation about the nature of the marches. This is from the Centre for Media Monitoring. So far, the British media has published 959 articles referencing #Gideon Falter and the Metropolitan Police. Just one of those articles mentions Falter is vice chairman at the Jewish National Fund, JNF UK, described as, quote, a charity complicit with ethnic cleansing in Palestine. Now, a new video has emerged that appears to show that Falter tried it on more than once. This is from Channel 4 News. It shows Falter in a completely different location along the route of the march, and he's being accused of going in and out of the protests by a different police officer. In other words, he was hoping that someone would kick off. Though, of course, as we know, nobody did. And did you notice this man in sunglasses by Falter's side? He bears a remarkable resemblance to this chap. He was pictured outside a secret Royal Society of Arts conference in December, where he was guarding Israeli President Isaac Herzog. Fascinating. According to reports, he works for the SQR Group, a security firm run by, get this, 2 former Mossad agents. If the 2 men are the same, and they certainly seem to be, then Gideon Falter wasn't just accompanied on his provocation by any old security guard, but by someone whose services are subcontracted to the Israeli state. Rivkah Brown also has some additional details on this story, published over at novaramedia.com. Brilliant reporting, as she reports this testimony from witnesses. Keelan, who requested that Novara Media only use his first name, saw Falter in Russell Square at around 11:30 a.m. on the 13th of April, over an hour before the march set off and long before any Shabbat service would have ended. Dan, who also asked to be referred by his first name for fear of professional reprisal, spotted the group walking along Southampton Street near Holborn at around 1 p.m. It would be a further hour before freelance investigative journalist John Lubbock captured Falter's altercation with police a few hundred metres away on Aldwych at around 2 p.m. In his Times op-ed, Falter speaks of being accompanied by a group of 5 men. The video evidence suggests these weren't just any individuals, but included bodyguards and a videographer. In the majority of traditions, it is against Jewish law to use electronic devices on the Sabbath. He wasn't being provocative because he was wearing a kippah, said Lubbock. He was being provocative because he was with a group of large bouncers. People wear uniforms that show political affiliations. We know how subcultures work. He's gone there to provoke. And as if things couldn't get any worse for Falter, the website Squawk Box has published this image. The blue arrow is pointing at Falter, who is busy complaining to police about how London is no longer safe for Jews. Meanwhile, meters away, encircled here in red, are 3 children of Holocaust survivors and 1 actual survivor of Hitler's genocide. They're just 4 of the many, many Jewish people who have very safely joined these marches. Michael, Gideon Falter has been at the centre of a media storm. We knew that already, but it's also been a real media masterclass, hasn't it?
Yes and no. I think, yes, it has been, in the sense that he has sort of created a news cycle where everyone is talking about anti-Semitism instead of talking about Gaza, which is probably something he's very pleased about. I do think that the manner in which this story has collapsed will hopefully, now I say hopefully because it's difficult to have much confidence in this, will hopefully mean that the media, and at least media consumers, will be somewhat more aware that when you see a clip that looks somewhat outrageous on first viewing, there might be something more complicated going on. So I do think sort of the fact that the reality of the situation has now come out will sort of open up people's minds to the idea that people do come specifically to provoke people so that they can get this one viral clip and then make out that there is this enormous anti-Semitism crisis. And I think Gideon Falter is a good example, actually, of how manufactured that whole process can be.
I think that's key. I'd also say, though, I was listening to Radio 4 over the weekend. On the Sunday, every half an hour, this story was being repeated, top of the news. And on the one hand, Michael, you're right, news consumers need to be a little bit more, how can I say this? Not quick to judge, but also I think the BBC and Radio 4 and organisations like that have a real responsibility to not indulge in this kind of misinformation and also take their time, find the facts, determine what the other side have to say. That's certainly how we feel about these things here at Novara Media. Michael, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in, especially as I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. Come back tomorrow for another stream from 6 p.m. You've been watching Novara Media. Good night.